agnostics, long-haired weirdos, short-haired weirdos, vandals, hooligans.
The government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government, love the government, hug the government.
Welcome to The Politics Guys, a place for bipartisan, rational, and civil debate on American politics and policy. I'm Michael Baranowski, a professor of political science at Northern Kentucky University. I'm joined today by my conservative counterpart, Cleveland area attorney and defender of freedom, Jay Carson.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Jay. So I am looking forward to talking about some different things, really, on today's, on this midweek bonus show, which, as listeners, longtime listeners know, we record right after the regular show. And so I
after
thought,
we're already after everybody's all liquored up a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
No, that's not true. No, I've
not at all.
Yes,
I
sort of stone cold sober on these shows.
That's right. I saved the gummies until later. Anyway, so last week, prosecutors in Santa Fe announced that they'd be charging actor Alec Baldwin with involuntary manslaughter in the killing of cinematographer Hyla Hutchins on the set of that low-budget Western Rust that Baldwin was filming there in October of 2021. And at this point, you might say, wait a second, did I stumble into some sort of a crime podcast? And no, that's not us, certainly. But there's an important aspect of this case that I think very much is in our wheelhouse, so to speak, and that's the Fifth Amendment's protections against self-incrimination, that right to remain silent, right, from all those Miranda warnings we've seen a million times in TV shows and movies, hopefully never in person. Let's hope so. At least that's probably not true for everyone. But so here's how this connects. In the immediate aftermath of the shooting, police detectives informed Baldwin of his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, as you'd expect them to, as well as his right to an attorney, and Baldwin waived those rights and then spoke to the detectives without an attorney for around an hour, at one point telling them that, the armorer always asked him if he wanted to check the gun to ensure there weren't live rounds, and he said, in his words, she said, "Do you want to check?" And I didn't want to insult her. We never had a problem. I said, "I'm good." So right there, I am no attorney, Jay. But if I were Alec Baldwin's attorney, I would have advised him to not say that specific thing, maybe among many others. But anyway, then there's
but I think that's one of those things that you call a bad fact, but I think you can deal with it.
Well, sure, but it'd be better not to have to deal with it in the first place.
Exactly,
right?
Better not to deal with it in the first place.
And not only that, but the fact that Baldwin is not just an actor, but a producer of the thing might suggest he has additional, responsibility or culpability. But anyway, then there's a conversation he has with police a week later, and I believe also without an attorney. He said, well, no, actually, it wasn't the armorer who handed me the gun, but this assistant director. And so there are facts that are now all of a sudden unclear, and the assistant director, I guess, cut a deal and so forth. And involuntary manslaughter is defined, right, as unintentional killing of someone through recklessness or negligence. And I would think just telling police, volunteering to police that, oh, yeah, I didn't, check to see if the rounds in the loaded gun I was handed were live or not, because, we'd always been good so far. That maybe helps the prosecution make their case. I don't know, Jay, I know.
I would agree, yes.
I mean, I know you're not a criminal attorney, or I know that phrasing is wrong, right? I guess you can be a criminal attorney.
Yeah.
Well, I just realized.
Criminal defense attorney.
Yeah, because you can be a criminal attorney without being a criminal defense attorney, but you're neither of those things. You are our go-to practical law guy, I guess you can say, because even though Ken's an attorney, he's up in his not ivory, but he's
impractical.
Well, he is. He's up there in a brutalist concrete tower of Chase Law School anyway, along with me. But right, so does it seem strange to you, I guess, that someone presumably as smart as Alec Baldwin? I mean, I don't think he's any dummy. He memorized all kinds of having good memory doesn't mean anything. I don't think he's any dummy.
Right.
That he would just so kind of casually waive his rights and then, certainly if not incriminate himself, at least, again, make the prosecution's job of filing charges against him easier.
It doesn't surprise me particularly at all.
Okay.
No, and because I think there's a human impulse, first of all, to look cooperative. right? And to probably be cooperative to some extent. Right. And there is I mean, you've read Crime and Punishment.
Oh yeah.
There's sort of a human impulse to confess. It's weird and seems counterintuitive, but I think it exists, and I've seen it play out lots of times. Or there's almost the sense of a lot of times someone will try to say, well, listen, I accept this much fault, but not that much fault. That sort of thing. So no, it doesn't surprise me that someone, when he's asked, hey, will you cooperate? Well, sure, I'll cooperate. Why wouldn't I cooperate? I've got nothing to hide, So
I don't know. I see what you're saying.
And again, it's sort of, and I think in those kind of heat of the moment type thing, maybe the more rational thing is to say, no, I'm not going to cooperate, or I'm not going to say anything until I speak with my attorney. But you may or may not be thinking entirely rationally, in that just following sort of a shocking emergency kind of situation.
Right. I guess, and you're right. It's easy it's like playing Jeopardy at home or something like that, where the answers come to you so quickly, and as opposed to being in the spot. But I would think that it's been drilled into almost everyone's head, especially someone in the entertainment industry who's, been in, I assume, a lot of, cop movies and other things like that, my response, I would think, would be, I'd love to cooperate, but I'm just feeling kind of just overcome and flustered. And I just think it would be better if I waited for my attorney to get here.
Yeah.
And then I'm still cooperative, but, and I don't know. It seems to me that the bigger problem here is if someone like Alec Baldwin, who I think is almost certainly of above average intelligence, even though his emotional control has certainly been publicly questioned, and rightly so at times. But if he does that, and certainly he could have had an attorney there in short order, then that suggests there might be some larger problems here. And it started me to think about this kind of broader issue of police interrogations as well as false confessions. And this is maybe a bigger issue than a lot of people appreciate. For instance, so far, the Innocence Project has exonerated 375 people, last count I saw, for crimes they didn't commit and they've been convicted for. 29% of them, 29% of those convictions that were exonerated were based at least in part on false confessions. And there's, a substantial amount of research that's found that most false confessions happen after these extended interrogations with police, and they almost always involve, in addition to that, police lying to suspects. And that gives me more than a little bit of pause. And what's your thinking on that? I mean, is that troubling to you at all?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, of course it is. And I think it's good that you have groups like the Innocence Project that takes those kind of cases and does that sort of work.
But of course, even if you're exonerated, you don't get those years of your life back in any way, right? And if it's a death penalty issue, well, then that's just it, which is, I would say, another argument against the death penalty, even when there is a confession. But given that they're dealing with limited resources here, how many more people than right now are in that similar situation? It used to be, at least I thought it was, a principle of justice that better that 10 guilty men go free, guilty people go free, than one innocent person be wrongly imprisoned. And I wonder if maybe in some way we've kind of changed that calculus, and better that, better the other way around. Hey, if every once in a while an innocent guy has to go to prison because the cops sweat him for 12 hours and lie to him, well, that's just the price you pay.
Yeah. I think and it's one of those things, and I don't know that there's a solution to it, but it's incentives, right? I mean, the cops' jobs is to get a conviction, to find a suspect and get a conviction.
Yeah.
They, I think, assume, work on assumptions that they're getting the right guy. I would, there are bad cops out there, but I think, they are a minuscule portion of people who would actually,
right,
intentionally, put away the wrong person.
But it's worse to have a bad cop than say have a bad trash collector, because the consequences
absolutely,
are, and that's why.
But the way that the playing field is tilted in favor of the police and what they are able to do in many cases, and human nature tends to be tilted against defendants.
Yeah,
right.
Because even if you allow that false confession, it's still the prosecution can say, well, look at this person confessed to this crime. They said, I did it, right? And I can show you their statement where and even though I should point out that, that there are certain limitations, right? Like, for instance, police can typically only hold you for 48 hours before they file charges.
Well, they also can't
waterboard you,
interrogate you if you ask. Yeah, well, they can't do that. Not supposed to. No, but if you request a lawyer, all questioning has to stop.
Yeah. Exactly.
Until your attorney arrives.
But it becomes one of these things that I remember this is going to date me, but everything dates me these days. Back to one of my favorite TV shows, and unfortunately you can't stream as far as I know. If I'm wrong, someone please tell me. Homicide: Life on the Street. Do you remember that show? I don't know if you watched it.
I remember the show. Yeah, I don't think
they had a fantastic segment. You can look it up on YouTube. Maybe I'll link it, about all the homicide detectives, about why you should never, ever, ever talk to a homicide detective without an attorney for exactly all those reasons. The incentives and sure, you absolutely have the right to an attorney, but once you ask for that, we can't help you out, and that's going to go all downhill. And we know you're guilty. Your partner flipped on you already, right? Because there's a double standard at work here. Because police can lie to you, but if you lie to the police, you can be charged with obstruction of justice. For instance, under Ohio law, you can penalties, I believe, are from up to 90 days in jail to second-degree felony up to 8 years in prison. Yeah. And there's not a similar thing on the cops, right? I think that's a problematic double standard, and I wonder how you feel about that double standard, or even if you think it is a double standard.
Oh, it's certainly a double standard. How do I feel about it? So, I mean, I guess I maybe I'm not the best person to ask. I mean, I'm looking at this in terms of, look, the case law on that is really pretty settled.
Well,
and has been for years.
Here's the thing. It is, I thought so too, but it actually, I would say it has not been questioned for over half a century. But I would say it's maybe less conclusive. It seems
pretty settled.
Well, here's what I mean. All this dates back to Frazier versus Cupp, 1969. It was a unanimous decision. And usually it's taken as the Supreme Court affirming that police can lie to suspects. But I pulled it up and read it. And what the majority opinion actually holds, Justice Marshall wrote it, said that the fact that the police misrepresented statements is, while relevant, insufficient in our view to make this otherwise voluntary confession inadmissible. These cases must be decided by viewing the totality of the circumstances. So,
so it's not a carte blanche. There could be other. Yes.
Now, it's never gotten to that. They've never reviewed a similar case or made any kind of other statement on that, but it's been taken. So I guess in that sense, it's settled in that no one's really seemed to push to question it. But also, I should say, there has been some movement, at least in some areas, on the state level. For instance, in 2021, Illinois and Oregon, they passed laws that do no longer allow police to lie to minors who are being questioned. This last year, 3 more states, California, Utah, and Delaware, passed similar laws, and Colorado has a similar law coming up for approval this year. And so it seems to me the logic here is that police shouldn't be allowed to lie to kids. And my question then is, well, why not? If they can lie to adults, why can't they lie to kids? It's a reasonable question, right?
Well, I guess the idea is that kids are less developed mentally, right? They're easier to trick. I've got 3 of them. You can. They're easy to fool. They are more vulnerable. So I think I think those are kind of the arguments, right? It goes to sort of vulnerability,
and I
sort of a
agree.
sense of fair play, right? And also, they're also not, in the eyes of the law, actual adults who can make important decisions about things like I'm waiving my right to counsel and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I agree with that logic entirely. But then I think, well, okay, plenty of science shows that brain development keeps on going into the mid-20s. Cognitive decline can start as early as the mid to late 40s. Oftentimes, people who are being questioned by the police are either on drugs or coming off of drugs or in some sort of, the word you use, I think, is very fitting, vulnerable situation. And so I said, well, if we're going to make this kind of strange legalistic exception for someone who's, say, 16, well, what about an exception for, somebody who's in cognitive decline in their mid 70s, or someone who is desperately in need of some sort of drug fix and withdrawal? I mean, those all seem to me to be, they could be equivalent, if not greater, instances of vulnerability before the law.
Well, in some cases, I mean, you could get to questions about, if there was a waiver of rights question, was the person competent to waive their rights, right? Mm-hmm. That would fall into that, if it was a dementia situation or something like that, that would already be covered.
But if you waive, here's my point, is if you waive your rights because the police are lying to you. See, I mean, it's one thing if the police tell you, well, you know what, your buddy's already turned and here's your chance to make a deal, but we're going to walk out of this room and it's going to be gone and, you're going to be in jail for the rest of your life. And all of that's just totally made up BS. How could that not affect your decision to, or certainly it would be a factor you would consider?
Yeah, no, and I think it does. It goes into, as the court said, totality of the circumstances, right, of surrounding the waiver. And if you were deceived into the waiver.
And then it becomes, like you said, there's this almost presumption of guilt on the part of, if you're a defendant, right? Well, he must have done something wrong and he looks kind of shifty and so forth. And the cop said that he confessed, and we have it on, and sure, he said his attorney saying something about how it was coerced and they lied to him, but, come on. And so that's where I think, and this goes to, I guess, a larger issue I have, there's a reason why there are so many protections in the Bill of Rights against people accused of crimes, because the power and the weight of the state just kind of coming down on you like that, even if you're Alec Baldwin, if you're wealthy and famous, it can be an awful lot. But if you're just some regular Joe or Jane, if you're just somebody who doesn't have any resources, I mean, this is just a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, and I think the framers knew that, right? And that's.
But I wonder if we still know that. It seems to me again, in a country with one of the largest prison populations or per capita or total numbers in the world, I wonder if we're forgetting a lot of this.
Again, I don't know. I mean, I guess we'd have to look at, I think you could also look at this as at another level. Uh-huh. If you were to take the other side. And you could say, well, shouldn't the police be able to rely on? Isn't it in the public interest, really, for people who have committed crimes to make true confessions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean, isn't it if you can get? I mean, look, if Alec Baldwin actually said what if that was the case of, hey, I should have. Or I just didn't look at that, check the gun. They offered me the opportunity and I didn't. Well, look, isn't that the kind of
like a crime to me?
That you want?
Yeah.
Yeah. And aren't we better off? Well, I don't know whether you say better off, or isn't there at least a societal interest?
Aren't we better off with Alec Baldwin behind bars? That
may well be the case.
No, I know what you're saying.
Setting aside Alec Baldwin, is there a societal interest in getting those who are guilty to confess, encouraging those who are guilty to confess?
Right. And
I mean, the idea would be, look, they did it. Justice will be served. There is again, just sort of the general ethical Christian concept, right? Of you confess your sins. And, the idea is also this ought to save the state time and expense in prosecuting something if someone will
Sure.
admit to it.
But yeah, on the other side, though, again, is that for every Alec Baldwin, there are who knows how many other people who are coerced into false. And, I should point out there are two problems with the false confession thing. Number one, you're putting the wrong person in jail or in prison. And number two, that means the person who did it gets away with it. And,
Right. Yeah.
So it's a double whammy here. And so that increases the impact. And so, for instance, I think I would be amenable to at least and I think this would be something that would need to be done at the state level, obviously, because criminal laws are most people who are prosecuted for violation of criminal laws happen at the state level. But I'd be okay with this for violations of federal law, some sort of protection for everyone against being lied to by police. And maybe there are certain exceptions that I'd be willing to consider. But as a general rule, I feel like, hey, if you can't lie to police without being charged with obstruction, that seems fair and right to me. But then police shouldn't be able to lie to you.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, so I guess maybe we're.
You ever see the episode of The Good Place with the look, if you're police, you got to tell us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep. I do. It's when
then we can talk. We can riff on the bonus show. But yeah, it's. To me, that's one of the funniest moments in television, that the guy who keeps saying, "Hey, if it's police, they gotta tell you if it's the police." And then there's this tremendous police raid with like 20 police cars and guys with megaphones and guns drawn and in uniform and a helicopter circling. And the suspect shouts out like, "If you're the police, you got to tell us." And he responds, "Yeah, we're the police." But I digress.
But that's that larger issue, right? Because there is certainly a societal, at least in some parts of society, a serious distrust of police. And when you have an organization that says, yes, we lie like hell all the time and will continue to do so, that's going to drive a certain amount of mistrust, I would think.
What about situations that aren't necessarily lies? Because look, I do this. This happens in civil litigation all the time, where you call up the other side and say, look, I'm looking at the facts here, and man, it doesn't look good for you, for your client. I think you got a real problem here. I think you ought to settle. Now, am I lying? Well, no. Am I shading opinion?
Yeah, I'd be okay with that. No, I agree. I see what you're saying. And yeah, I think it should be an instance.
A cop could say, listen, hey, this sure doesn't look good for you.
And that's not a lie.
And I think there's a difference than saying your accomplice already flipped on you.
I think,
as opposed to...
I'd want to make that distinction of knowingly making false statements. Yeah, I think that's, and so I certainly would be for that, but I don't think that anything like that would be, I think you can do it when it comes to minors, because people there's that kind of emotional kind of response. Oh my God, the cops are sweating this little kid sort of thing, when oftentimes it might be, like a 17-year-old who could beat the hell out of both you and me, right. Probably.
Well, and the lines we draw for minors and non-minors are sort of arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
But that's just kind of where we draw them. And whether, look, should you be 18 to vote, or could you vote at 17, or should it be 19, or, whatever. I mean, the line, there's necessarily a line, and it's necessarily arbitrary at some point.
And, and I feel like I can make this argument without being anti-police, because I've gone on the record a number of times saying that I actually think there should be higher police pay, more police funding, because what we ideally want is especially when we have people with guns and badges, who can take away your liberty, that they should be incredibly well paid and professional and incentivized to do the right thing all the time. And I think in too many instances, police are underpaid and overstressed, and so they end up in situations that bad things happen. And I think a lot of that has to do with our not giving them the resources and the sort of salaries and compensation that I think they very well deserve and need.
Yeah.
So there you go. I don't know that that's a position that's going to get me anywhere if I ever wanted to run for office. Thank God I don't. We hope you enjoyed this preview of our supporters exclusive midweek show. If you'd like to hear the rest of the episode, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter. Supporters get ad-free access to all of our shows, membership in our Politics Guys Discord group where you can join in on the conversation, and other benefits at different levels of support. To become a supporter, go to patreon.com/politicsguys. You can also support us through Venmo, we're at politicsguys, or through PayPal. You'll find all of our support links in the show notes, as well as at politicsguys.com/support. And if you'd like to get the midweek show, but you're not in a position to become a financial supporter, that's not a problem. Just send me an email at mike@politicsguys.com, and I'll be happy to get that set up for you.